Hello and welcome back to Inquisitor Martyr. Last time, much like this time, we're going to keep going with Intel. Wow, I just drew a blank on that. That was actually kind of sad. I knew the word and I'm just sitting here looking at my screen like, what the hell is the word? How am I doing this? Help! Movement speed, warp damage, no critical hits. That's a bit rough. I don't care. Enemies are armored, doable. Warp damage to... Okay, that's actually kind of terrifying, because I think the Eldar do a lot of warp damage. Oh well.
The enemies of the Imperium are infinite, and such a vast threat can only be fought with ingenuity. Kill the Masters, and you will render a sea of vermin helpless.
So I was watching more Warhammer 3 gameplay, just seeing all the neat stuff, and I was watching Lionheart play news in the realm of Khorne, and inside there was also the ogre army for Greasus Goldtooth. And he clicked on Greasus, and his little portrait, he's kind of leaning back, big smile, gold teeth, crown on his head, and I sat there and I looked at it for a second, and all I could think is, why does he look like Post Malone if he didn't have face tattoos? Like, that's all my mind went to instantly, as I was like, he looks like Post Malone. This is a very weird coincidence. But I just couldn't get it out of my head. And now I can never unsee that.
Loading.
I was on Bella Lost Souls looking at, latest Warhammer news and all that. Their D&D stuff makes me want to tear my own spine out, Guide on how to play as a himbo.
Loading.
Like I said last episode, people have done a lot more damage to D&D in the past few years than decades previous. But there was some pictures of like night haunts, I think they are, but they're like ghost guys. And anytime I see stuff like that, any ghost units, new zombies, the Ossiarch Reapers, anything like that, I just sit here, grinding my teeth like, we could have had that in fantasy. Heinrich Kemmler could have had a cool army of ghosts instead of dumbass zombies that still suck. I'm still grumpy. I will never not be grumpy over like Age of Sigmar, just because a lot of that stuff could have just transferred over. Especially because you have like, I think it's Thoric Ironbrow, who's like the grumpy dwarf who just wants everything to go back to the way it was. None of them fancy guns or cannons. Ballistas and stone throwers are what my people made and what my people will use forever. You could have, because they have these new dwarves that have like dirigibles and all these steam-powered things, and I'm thinking, we could have that. We could have the old grumpy man who doesn't want anything new, and then we could have like the dwarves of the future. And it'd be such an interesting kind of thing that offsets each other. That old versus new mentality. And I think it'd be cool. Or the Ossiarch Reapers. You could just give them to Nagash. Be like, hey, Nagash is back. End times happen. Cosmics suck. Everything got reset. He's got these guys now. Vampire Count still got their dudes. Tomb King still got their dudes. But Nagash is rocking his own fancy army. Night Haunts could be, kind of a side tier or a side army to Vampire Counts, or you could even introduce them as like, I'd say almost like a necromancer army, where it's more focused on skellies and stuff as opposed to vampires. Something different, I don't know. stream of consciousness, consciously doing this. This is all just word, like I'm thinking it as I say it. But I think it'd be cool. The elves, I don't care. I don't like the elves anyways. Dwarf gang for life. But there's them. Who else was there that had some interesting stuff? Oh, like the Chaos cults. They made them look real cool. A lot of fancy units and all this. I'm sitting here looking at it going, damn. That would have made it a lot more interesting. They could have had fantasy Chaos cults, much in the same vein as like Lost and the Damned. Where, you know, you have like Empire with these cultist auxiliaries, or cultists with Empire auxiliaries, instead of just like, yep, it's Norska and Warriors of Chaos. Anything else, we don't care, it doesn't exist. I do understand part of it, though. From a narrative perspective, the end times had to happen. They built that up for so long that if they just up and stopped it, they'd be just blue-balling the hell out of people, and I get it. But I keep saying it, Age of Sigmar, I'm not even mad at like, oh, it's new, I don't like it. It's the writing and the setting is bad. And I hope people get that. Like, the setting is just terrible. Oh, it's planes of magic and they're theoretically infinite, but they're not, because otherwise nothing matters. And everybody's trying to invade each other's plane because of reasons. I just see that and think there's no reason. I saw stuff for some of the lore, and it's like, oh yeah, the Stormcast Eternals, you know, the Sig Marines. Some of their like resource carrying stuff is like a chunk of rock that's just floating that they toss all the stuff on. You know, this chunk of stone, massive chunk of land floating behind them, like it's a piece of Pandora from Avatar. You know, it's looking like a chunk of Outland from World of Warcraft. Expect the Draenei to pop out and be like, hello there. But no, it just feels really weird. I don't like it. I don't vibe with it. I liked the finite nature of fantasy. Because it felt like, okay, these guys are fighting for this territory. This makes sense. Oh, these guys are dealing with Skaven because Skaven found Warpstone here. That makes sense. Oh, these guys accidentally went into Lustria. They're gonna die. You know, the Lizardmen aren't letting them escape. It all tracks. You know, these ideas make sense. They fit within the things. I would have loved, I've said it before, to see the East expanded more. Cathay didn't really get an army. Nippon didn't get anything except a touch of lore. You could have introduced a lot of stuff. The Dark Eldar, they found ways to go from like Nagaroth and that whole area west to raid the coasts of, you know, Cathay and stuff. But the whole thing is, the lore goes, oh yeah, they also found these horrible monsters. And, you know, the monsters are bad. They could have touched on that. There could have been more stuff west. There's a lot of avenues they could have taken to keep the setting alive a lot longer. But, you know, their decision is made. Nothing can change it. The best they can do now is that new, like, couple hundred years before Karl Franz kind of setting. Which might be interesting. I don't know. I worry it's gonna have, you know, Gears of War Halo syndrome. You know, you sat there, especially in those games, they'd sit there and be like, oh hey, you find this type of enemy or this vehicle, isn't it neat? And then the next game they're like, oh yeah, this is the future. They don't use that anymore. And you're sitting there going, why? And it's just the worst lore. Like Gears of War, they had these melee guys. They're like, oh yeah, the reason you don't see them anymore is they went extinct because they would all bonsai charge the cog and die. And I'm just sitting here thinking, what kind of lore is that? Just, oh yeah, they were too stupid and just bum rushed themselves into oblivion. Or the brute plasma rifle, they're just like, yeah, shut up, don't ask. Or they had a 3-man vehicle that was essentially their version of a warthog. And that fell into the, hey, shut up and stop asking questions as to why this vehicle isn't here anymore. We don't have to answer these. And stuff like that, just, it's not fun. You know, continuity is very important. You can't really introduce new undead and just be like, oh yeah, the guy who figured it out just exploded. Don't ask questions. No one figured out how he did it. Because you can only do that so many times before it becomes a really bad narrative cop-out. You know, it's Chekhov's gun, effectively. If you introduce this like fancy new undead and it's like, oh, we lost the ability to make it, someone has to find the way to make it. You can't just introduce stuff, be like, yeah, it was cool and powerful and it's gone now, and then never touch it again. That's just, oh my god, it's awful. Admittedly, that's how a lot of science fiction and fantasy goes, is absolutely stupid things like that.
You've set a fine example for their kind, Inquisitor.
Admittedly, there are times where it's understandable, like Mass Effect and the Reapers. Lore-wise, could someone find out how to make Reapers? Probably. But you have the justification of like, oh, well, they're never coming back, because no one would want to create genocidal robots. There is no valid reason you can't have a guy who's just like, yeah, you know, I was bored and it was Saturday, so I brought back a race of robots that are created to exterminate all sentient life that achieves, like, spaceflight. It's like, no, you don't. You don't do that. That is not a thing you do on a Saturday. Could have been better. I actually need to melt. Actually, I don't really need to melt down all my stuff. Cooldown reduction when surrounded. I would rather not get to surrounded status. Oh, it's a panic room. I'm actually not going to put any modifiers on this because Panic Room sucks already. Okay, I'm putting a modifier on. I'm stupid. What did that do? Okay, create a demon. Don't care. I shouldn't have put that on. I'm stupid. Oh my god. Stop touching buttons.
Tactical noospheric network online. Target has been barricaded behind a security door to avoid immediate extermination by hostiles. The door will be breached within a few Terran minutes. Violent intervention required to retrieve the subject alive.
I was about to ask, why does everybody here explode into, like, unnecessary amounts of blood? But then I remembered Khorne. That literally just the name explains, like, oh yeah, that's why. Of course he would have, you know, the guy who wants blood constantly, of course everybody's gonna explode like they're a tomato paste piñata. I do kind of wish, like, blood played more of a role with Khorne. I know it's completely antithetical to his whole shtick, but, like, psychers or casters that use blood, like, only thing I can think of is Vladimir from League of Legends, you know, a Hemomancer. I think that'd be a really cool way of, you know, really leaning into the blood aspect. Because I think it's the Kitans, the big tank tread-legged robo monster guys that 40K Khorne can use that shoot like skulls, and it's like, okay, that I guess that works. I'm not too keen on the whole thing. I feel like it's one of those things where I feel as though the idea is there, but the execution feels really off. You know, they've essentially Flanderized Khorne and the Worshippers to such a degree where it's like, okay, what do their weapons shoot? Skulls. Yeah, he's the skull guy, right? It's like, yeah, he's the skull guy. But you know, you can do something other than skulls. You know, you can actually create some pretty interesting things, or like him vehemently hating psychers and casters. It's like, you know, Hemomancer, it allows a caster, but they're reliant on, you know, blood, gore, and violence.
Reach the extraction zone for subatomic matter displacement.
This way it feels... I'm trying to think of the way to word it. It feels more in line with his whole MO. Being like, oh yeah, well, this guy, his whole shtick is, you know, ultra-violence. And these casters, while perceived as cowardly, rely on that ultra-violence and have to cause it to further amplify their abilities. I don't know, just, it feels like the logical conclusion as opposed to just casters bad, me Angie, me use skull. And it's not like it just flat out usurps the power of other, you know, 40K Khorne worshippers like, I think, Khorne or anybody like that, Angron, you know, Demon Princes, what have you. It doesn't usurp it, it just further shows like, hey, some guys figured out other ways to use this. I just want Khorne groups to be a little more interesting. I mean, I've said it before, everybody in Chaos is a little blah. They're very kind of paint by numbers. They do this and they don't deviate from this. You know, the playbook is here. Do not use anything but the playbook. Which is a shame, you know. These factions could definitely use a bit more variety.
Operation complete.
I mean, look at, I think it's Red Corsairs. They're space pirates.
Unlikely achievement. End of log.
You know, who doesn't want space pirates? I want space pirates. Or I've said before, I'd love to see minor Chaos Gods. You know, you can have the big four, but then you can have guys who are like, hey, I'm essentially part of a subdomain. This way, you have other powers at B who might have a little bit of influence on things. And it just makes things more interesting. Because I think of, like, D&D, the Abyss. The Abyss, you know, there's infinite layers, nascent lords, and minor demon princes come up and are like, hey, I'm just gonna go take a place no one owns and start my own little club here. And I feel like that's kind of what the Realms of Chaos should be, and seem like that's what they're kind of designed as, is just infinite possibility. It's just you have to tame it and bind it to your will. Much like how the Big Four have done. They've created their own little areas that are theirs. Alright, that's the entire map. Well, the Carthian sword's interesting. But that is all for now. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit the like button, it helps out the channel a lot. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.